On this edition of the program, Jimmy Carter, the man, remembered, Joe Biden's farewell address, and TikTok is saved because of Martin Luther King. It's all coming up. Hey, everybody, a real quick reminder, I will be in Washington, D.C. this Sunday, covering the inauguration on Monday, but on Sunday, we are doing a show with Jen Briney and Andrew Heaton, my podcast, We're Not Wrong, live at the Studio Theater in Logan Circle. So, head on over to Eventbrite, search for We're Not Wrong, and you will find tickets. It's going to be a good time. Come out and join us. We're going to be hanging out afterward. That's We're Not Wrong, live in D.C. this Sunday night at 7 p.m. See you there.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for January 17th, 2025. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you here in Austin, Texas. And we have a treat for you. The bulk of today's episode is going to be a conversation with a man who had a friendship with Jimmy Carter for the last 24 years, from when Jimmy Carter was 70 years old until the day that he died. He is somebody that has been there around the Carter family. He was in attendance at his funeral last week, and he's got great stories of one of the most consequential politicians of his era, somebody that was a part of major peace deals, and until the day that he died, controversial in politics, but uncontroversial in life for being somebody who was of tremendous decency. The man from Plains, Georgia, discussed with our guest. Let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat for you here on the program today. Ricardo Fernandez is joining us, somebody that has a lot of stories to tell about the dearly departed President Jimmy Carter, who had his state funeral last week. Ricardo, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Justin. I appreciate it.
How'd you first meet President Carter?
In 2001, about the time you started getting involved in politics as well with the hanging chads, I heard.
Yes, that was it. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, technically, it was really the impeachment of President Clinton and
Okay,
and
a little bit more. Okay.
Yeah, but that was right in my backyard because I grew up in South Florida, so I could see the chads hanging with my own eyes.
But President Carter came to a book signing right outside Chicago. He was promoting his book an hour before daylight. And I had told my sister, I'm like, hey, we're both off tonight. Would you want to go meet our first president? So we went to go meet him, and he signed 17 books a minute. So he doesn't really talk to people. But he looked up at me. I saw his steely blue eyes. I was like, whoa, he saw me.
Yeah.
So I read the book. I wrote him a letter, and I went down to Plains, Georgia, where he was teaching Sunday school. And I was like, wow, this is pretty impressive. I talked to some of the locals. I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back, and that started a relationship with us that's gone on for almost 24 years.
Wow, that's crazy. Just out of the blue, you read the book, liked the book, wrote the author a letter, and the author was obviously the president of the United States.
Right. And I don't know what I wrote because it was handwritten, so I thought it'd be better to handwrite it. So I don't really remember exactly what I wrote, but I'm sure it was pretty flowery.
Sure. How would you describe President Carter when he was, just hanging around, when you were just talking to him?
He is a very normal person. So he's very humble. He's very tolerant of people because he likes to be about people. So he would walk around the little town, or we go out together, and we'd fly in a plane together, and he'd get up and shake everyone's hand on the plane. Yes, I'm President.
On a commercial flight?
Yes. Every hand he'd shake. That was his tradition.
Really?
Yes. Hi, I'm President Carter. Yes, thank you for voting. Yeah, okay, thank you so much. And he'd take pictures with everybody. Then he'd go sit down, and then he wanted to do his work. But pretty humble.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fascinating. So, did the stewardesses or the flight attendants like hate him? Like what is like how do you deal with that? Especially if you're trying to get because if me or you just want to go shake everybody's hand on the flight,
Yeah.
that would normally be something that would be frowned upon. I guess when you're president, you get to do it.
Yeah, and he usually traveled with a bunch of Secret Service agents as well, so they could be a little intimidating. But he had this plan, and the excitement on the plane was palpable because everyone wanted their turn to take a picture, and so excited. You see everyone buzzing around every time.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people really didn't know who he was, which was also very funny. So you walked
I
through
know,
the
right?
airport with him. There's a little man with a fedora and holding his mug hand. People walking right by him have no idea that was President Jimmy Carter.
That's wild. That's wild. And I guess it does make sense. If you're going to if you're going to be a former president on a plane, right, on a commercial jet, then people are going to want to come up to you because this is the only time you very rarely in your life get to sit in that close of proximity to a president. So it probably makes more sense just to get it out,
Get it over with.
get it over. Yeah, exactly. Instead of having 50,000 different notes passed up to you.
Yes. And if you go to his town of Plains, Georgia, it's about 600 people. I've been there 80 times to Plains, Georgia.
Wow.
Yes, it's kind of a trek for me, but people ask the locals, they say, what is his most rare Jimmy Carter book? And they say, jokingly, an unsigned one. Because he's signed so many books. He'll sign. He signed so much that it's really flooded the market.
What were his hobbies? What did he like to do?
He had many hobbies. He was a woodworker, and so he would make cabinets, cradles for his grandkids, and he would sell them for the Carter Center for fundraisers. So some of those, because a president worked on them, would sell for $1 million. President
I
Carter.
don't doubt it.
Yes. And he liked painting, so he did paintings. He picked that up later. He was an author. He wrote 32 books, which is one of the most prolific for presidents. And he wrote the first one to do a poem book, the first one to do a novel. And so he liked to write.
Yeah.
And, well, and of course, traveling. He had so many interests. He loved people that were different. So he's been to 145 different countries.
So he was a big traveler. He would get out
Yes.
probably, very late in his life, right? Because
yeah.
by the time that you met him, he was in his 70s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was down in Plains, and he was 81, and he was playing softball. I skied with him when he was 80. I swam with dolphins.
Skied?
with him.
Like snow skied?
Yes. Downhill
Wow.
skiing.
That's dangerous, man. For an
Very.
80-year-old, like you take the wrong fall if you take the wrong fall when you're 20, you're laid
Exactly.
up for a month.
Yeah, I told him I was nervous about. I'm a physical therapist, so I was nervous about
Yeah.
skiing. That was like 40s. He's like, I didn't start skiing until I was 60. So I was like, okay, I guess I shouldn't be too nervous.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I'd be nervous. Jeez. I mean, so you're skiing when you're 80 and you just picked it up like, a decade ago. That's wild. That's insane. Obviously, President Carter's legacy, for many, especially, I'm in my 40s now, so I don't remember him being in office, but he had a very contentious political legacy, but a absolutely unimpeachable legacy of charity with Habitat for Humanity. How much of his just like day when he was hanging out was he dedicated to that? Because it seemed all encompassing from the outside.
Yeah, he was definitely dedicated to serving others. And one of the funny stories I have to tell you, about 8 years ago, we're having dinner together. And he looked at me, he's like, Ricardo, how come every time I call you and ask you to come down here, you come and drop everything and you come and see me? I'm like, well, give me a minute. I said, well, you were a loser in 1980. He's like, what? I'm like, well, let me finish. Please, let me finish.
Let me finish.
1980, you lost the presidency in a landslide to President Reagan. You conceded before the election was over. Your Democratic Party wanted nothing to do with you. You go home, you find out that your peanut farm is $1 million in debt. I said a
Oh,
normal
wow.
person, yeah, a normal person would have said, okay, I got to make some money. But he never took a dime for a speech. So if he gave a speech, it was free. He didn't want to make money off the presidency. And so what did he do? He started the Carter Center in 1982. And then he went and joined Habitat for Humanity, which was already going since 1976. But he jumped on in 84. And he started going to these 35 years. He built a week of his time. He built houses for poor people.
Wow.
And people that earn those houses. So it's interest free, and it's you have to have sweat equity. You have to build like 300 to 500 hours in other houses, and so he does all this stuff. And I said, I look at where you came from, and it would have been really enticing to try to make money. But instead, you just went to serve others. You went to Africa. You worked on guinea worm disease, which was inflicting people with 1986. There's 3.5 million cases of a 3-foot long worm popping out of your body. In 2023, since he jumped on it, only 14. I said, you went and worked with trachoma and schistosomiasis and all these diseases that no one ever heard of because they're only in poor countries where people aren't like us. I said, so that's a hero to me. That's someone I admire. Someone that wants to serve others as their legacy instead of trying to pad your pocket and look out for yourself. So I said, that's why you're my hero. And he said, well, you had me lost at loser.
I stopped listening when I heard loser.
I was nervous.
That's funny. That's funny. He's got such, I think, an underrated legacy because while everybody remembers the landslide to Reagan and everything that came around that and inflation and the Iranian hostages, for a political nerd like me, he's probably most effective for like next to JFK as cementing the primary process. The fact that we have the electoral process that we have right now, it really does come down to him in Iowa, placing second to uncommitted, but we'll say first for
right.
To make it simple for everybody else. But how aware of his legacy? How much did he talk about either his career before the presidency or the presidency itself?
Yeah, he was from South Georgia, and he lived on a pretty modest farm, and most of his friends were African American, and it was during the segregated South. So that I think instilled a lot in him of aware that there's differences between his family and the families around him. And his father was very frugal. So his father taught him the importance of money. So President Carter actually was a landlord and a homeowner as a teenager. He was 13 years old. He owned 5 buildings that he charged rent for. What happened, he would...
I would wonder what they went for in Plains, Georgia, back when he was a teenager.
It was $2 or $2.50 a month for the rent.
For rent, yeah. I wonder what it took to get to put him up to buy him.
So he bought cotton at 5 cents a pound. So he bought 2,500 pounds of cotton. The price soared to 18 cents a pound. He sold it and he bought all those houses for that. So his father taught him the importance of working. And then his father also told him he had to go to college for free. So he wanted to go to Naval Academy. So President Carter went to the Naval Academy. And he's the only president that went there, even though he was the 5th president in a row that was World War II Navy, which was pretty interesting. So then his father passed away, and he decided that he wants to go back and help the peanut farm. So he quit the Navy, started working at the peanut farm, and his father was on his deathbed. He's like, wow, my dad helped all these people. I had no idea that my dad did all this stuff for the community. So he wanted to get involved in the community, ran for Senate, lost, contested it, won, ran for governor, lost, and then went 4 years later and won, and then had the audacity to run for president, which everyone thought it was a joke. But then he became president, and he took on a couple issues that were very hot button issues, very relevant today. The Panama Canal is one of the ones that he wanted to give that back to Panama. The hostages was a problem. The energy problem was a big problem. But he was always humble, and I think that was one of his downfalls as a president, is that he carried his own bags. He wore a sweater instead of a suit. Wouldn't let him play Hail to the Chief. He got rid of the yacht Sequoia. He said it was a waste of money. The
Yeah.
temperature was so cold, people couldn't type. It was so cold in the White House. But I think he stuck to his principles. But being someone that likes history like you, if you look
Yeah.
at the parallels of when he ran as president and the current administration, there are so many parallels. It's kind of
I'm so glad you brought that up because I have a very specific question for you.
Yeah.
That literally just happened last night because we have this deal, this hostage deal that broke out in Israel, and Joe Biden came out, did a press conference. He was asked specifically whether or not Donald Trump or himself should get credit for this idea, for this. He responded dismissively by saying, "Are you joking?" He began his farewell address giving himself credit and his team credit. So the idea of credit very much mattered. And the last time that I think we can remember anything with American hostages that dragged down a one-term president that then was giving credit to the next administration was with Carter. How did he process that? Did he ever mention, did he ever talk about whether or not the way that he was discussed in history, did it ever rankle him? How much of a credit hound? It sounds like he was somebody that would let some of that wash off his back, but I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I'd be out to dinner with him many, many times. And people come up to him and say, "Oh, you were president. When were you president?" You know, a stupid question like that, or just get sick of it. So many times he'd turn to me, he'd say, "I was president for 4 years. I was not president for 93 years." You know? And so really, he looked at the presidency as like more of a stepping stone to accomplish what he really wanted to accomplish. But the parallels, President Carter, the hostages 444 days, released when President Reagan was being sworn in as president. These hostages, Hamas, 470 plus days are been under control by Hamas. And interesting, President Carter had a primary challenger named Kennedy. Biden had a primary challenger named Kennedy.
Primary challenger named Kennedy. Yeah, true.
It's pretty neat. MAGA. So if you look at like MAGA, I don't know if you can see this, but this is Reagan, button.
Yep.
Let's make America great again.
Let's make
That
America
was his
great
slogan.
again.
And we have President Trump, his slogan the same. Just very interesting. A lot of parallels that are similar that I find kind of eerie. Inflation, highest under Biden, next highest under Carter. So if you look at the similarities, you're like, wow. But the difference is what you do after that. And I think President Carter.
Yeah. And that's the thing is Jimmy Carter was kind of anything but a career politician, and Joe Biden is the very definition of a career politician.
Yes.
You know, I don't imagine, well, without speculating on the man's health, I don't, you know, you don't know exactly how much activity Joe Biden has, but at least the time that he spent outside of office after the Obama administration does not give one the idea that he is going to be tirelessly building houses for those for the needy. Nor do I think that he has the same policy of not accepting money for speeches. I think he is probably more than willing to cash a check on that. So from your perspective, everything that happened in the White House, it sounds like, look, if there was a relevant story to something that you were talking about, he was happy to tell it, but this was not a thing that weighed on him. His legacy as a president did not weigh on him.
No, he was very thankful for the Camp David Accords with Egypt and Israel. Mm-hmm. So he talked about that a lot. They never violated a sentence of that, he said. So he's very proud because those two countries are at war for a long time. And so that's a great accomplishment. But when you look at, where was I going with that? So I'm sorry, I just drew a blank because I jumped on that. But so you were saying right before that, what were you saying?
Oh, just his legacy as president, and specifically the idea of credit or blame,
right?
How he processed that.
Yes, and he took credit immediately. So we had the failed hostage rescue, if you remember, in April of 1980. So they had Desert Operation Eagle Claw. They went to try to rescue the hostages, and he micromanaged that. a lot. He wanted to know the name of all the hostage takers, their family members, how many children they had. He really wanted to know all those things. So I think that was a little bit of a struggle for him. But I didn't talk about his presidency too much. We usually talked about the post-presidency and habitat and serving the community. But one time I was coming down to Georgia, and I'm not a dummy. So before I would see him, I would look at the current events so I have something to talk about and see how it tied in with him. So I had something to start the conversation with. And my level of understanding is here, and his was like over here. But he humored me because he knew I tried. But the one time I was going down to Georgia, and the Senate was looking at trying to offer reparations for the hostages. So I said, President Peter, what do you think about that, paying those hostages reparations? He's like, they can't do that. We have a deal, and the deal is it's done. No reparations. So he was all excited, telling me all the details of that deal that they ran. And so that's about as much as he got really passionate about the presidency. But he was very keen on trying to help the communities with hostage negotiation. And one of his last negotiations he did was with the King family, the Dr. King family. They were squabbling over selling his Nobel Peace Prize, where one sibling wanted the money, the other one wanted to keep it in the family. So he went there and mediated the disagreement there. That's one of his last ones.
Wow.
Yeah, he was telling me about that. He was pretty excited about going down there. He respected the King family, and he was trying to.
That is Georgia royalty. Jimmy Carter coming to talk to the King family.
Absolutely. The other Nobel laureate from Georgia that everyone talks about is Dr. King.
This is your update, brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That's where you support this show. Head on over to our Substack. Get 2 bonus episodes each and every week if you subscribe at our $12 level. It's $3 a week. You know, you buy me a cup of coffee, you deserve 2 bonus episodes. Then, of course, we have our annual plan, cheapest way that you can possibly support the show. That, of course, is $99. Less than $100 for 150 episodes of the show. That's value, friends. Oh, that's value. But let's get to some of the stories that we obviously were not talking about while we were looking into the past on Jimmy Carter's life. I want to play you this clip.
I talked to a very high-ranking White House official at the end of last week. I today, once again, extended my personal communication to the White House, not to the president, but to those who would be central to making a decision as to whether or not there should be an extension. So they're very well aware of what Senator Booker and I are attempting to do.
Courtesy to Matt Bailey, who asked that question to Senator Ed Markey for the PX3 program about the TikTok ban. So Markey was saying in that answer that he has been in contact with the Biden administration to see if they would trigger the 90-day extension for TikTok before it was banned. And today, just as I was about to record this on Thursday afternoon, we get the news from TikTok or from the Biden administration that they are not going to enforce the ban on Sunday. Meaning that when the bipartisan legislation that has made its way to Joe Biden's desk, that Joe Biden signed, Joe Biden has now indicated that they will not enforce it because, and I am not kidding you guys, it's a holiday weekend. Of course, Donald Trump is inaugurated on Monday, and so essentially they're saying, you deal with all of this. We guess that Donald Trump is probably not going to ban it, but this is just a fiasco at this point. Like, either you're going to pass and sign a bill where you ban this thing or you don't. The fact that we're going back and forth on it is patently ridiculous, but that's the news as it is breaking here as I record it. And again, thank you to Matt Bailey. Might be some more quotes from Congress because of our friend Matt Bailey, who is out there in D.C. Last night, Joe Biden delivered his farewell address from the Oval Office, marking the conclusion of his term. In his speech, he expressed optimism about America's future, but cautioned against the concentration of power amongst a wealthy few, and highlighted the tech industrial complex spreading misinformation for profit and the influence of anonymous political donations. I watched the speech. Look, there are parts in there that are flowery. Obviously, you have Joe Biden talking about the Statue of Liberty being built and what it means. But boy, is this guy all over the place. Like, he has shown to have really terrible political instincts throughout his term. And he goes out with a discordant and weird farewell address that is probably, in my mind, the most Joe Biden way to go out is the way he went out. Because he began his speech by taking credit for the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, which he got a question during the press conference about it, asking whether or not he or Donald Trump should get more credit for this, to which he dismissively said, "Are you joking?" Meaning, of course we do. Now, would it have gotten done if he had won the White House? Well, no, he didn't even make it past the summer, right? You know, he had to drop out, and his vice president also failed to defeat Donald Trump. But it's very Joe Biden that it's like, before we even get to this long, flowery thing about the Statue of Liberty, please know that it's me. It's my credit. I did it. We did it. The Trump campaign was kept abreast of this deal that we were definitely going to land the plane on the entire time. It is total coincidence that Trump's people got involved. Total coincidence. There were also a few petty things on the way out. He called for Congress to ban stock trading. A reminder that one of the biggest, most famous trader of stocks in Congress is Nancy Pelosi. A reminder also that Nancy Pelosi played an integral role in ejecting Joe Biden from his quest to have a second term as president. And then you have this tech industrial complex, which of course is meant to evoke the military industrial complex. He name-checked Dwight D. Eisenhower, who mentioned the military industrial complex in his farewell address. There's just one difference, and that is, well, maybe it's not a difference. Eisenhower was from the military, and so he was very well aware of what it meant to have a bunch of massive companies that make their money permanently building weapons for the United States. Now, Joe Biden does not have a particular track record in the world of tech, but maybe he is of that because, let's be frank, between publicly available information we now have of Twitter and Facebook and just things that we have seen the Biden administration try to get away from, they have been among the biggest purveyors of misinformation. And by that, I mean just actively deceptive practices and censorship. So for him to say, oh, they're giving up on fact checkers, like, it's just rich. It's rich coming from him. It is very rich coming from somebody for whom had to mint the term cheap fakes to shape the narrative on what was plainly obvious to anybody who was looking with two eyes. And that was, the man was having a failing mental capacity. This is the same administration that forced sitting representatives to call back reporters from the Wall Street Journal to recant things that they had already told them. Like, the Biden administration has been among the most tightly controlled narratives that we have ever seen. Like, beyond, it goes beyond lying per se. It is more just trying to control the flow of information. So I think it's pretty ridiculous for him to say that. But there we go. Go watch Joe Biden's farewell address, or don't. We got some polls for the midterms. Never too early. New polling shows Georgia Governor Brian Kemp leading Senator Jon Ossoff 46 to 40% in a potential 2026 matchup with 14% undecided. This is a right-leaning poll. WPA intelligence poll for Club for Growth found Ossoff leading other potential candidates by 10 to 16 points. It's a 500 likely voter poll with a 4.4% margin of error, which means that Kemp's lead would be outside of it. He currently has a 58% favorability rating within Georgia. Ossoff has a sub 50. Going to be a big question about whether Brian Kemp wants to run for that seat. Because if he does want to run for that seat, well, I think he would be formidable. I don't think a lot about Ossoff as a politician in terms of his rhetorical ability. But obviously right now, Georgia, like Arizona, a weird state to have two Democratic senators. Finally, Pete Hegseth's confirmation vote for defense secretary will be delayed past Inauguration Day. Senate Armed Service Chair Roger Wicker confirmed, leaving the Pentagon temporarily without leadership. Democrats are likely to delay the vote until Wednesday or Thursday. While Republicans have the votes to confirm him, Democrats' consent is needed to expedite the process and have it done by Inauguration Day. GOP leaders argue that the position does need to be filled quickly. For comparison, Biden's Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was confirmed 2 days after inauguration in 2021. The Trump team hasn't indicated who might serve as interim leader, although Deputy Secretary Kathleen Hicks is next in the succession line. We know that because Lloyd Austin, the current Secretary of Defense, went to the hospital. Didn't tell anybody. And eventually, when that was discovered, Kathleen Hicks had to be called off a beach in Puerto Rico. Oh, fun times. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go if you want to be a part of this team, if you want to get 2 bonus episodes, if you want to buy me a coffee each and every week, get those 2 bonus episodes, including the one that came out on Thursday where we got into the Israel-Hamas deal and the questions of whether or not it's going to actually get ratified. Go ahead and check that out. And now, back to our conversation about President Jimmy Carter. I want to ask you about something that happened while you guys were friends and whether or not it reverberated. This is going to be a bit of a deep cut, so I have no idea whether or not you have anything on this.
Okay.
But in the 2012 election, many people will remember that there was a video of Mitt Romney saying that there was a significant portion of America that would never vote for Republicans because they were dependent on the Democratic Party. He looked kind of haggard. It was looked at as something that sank his campaign. Whether or not it did, we can debate. But one of the little bits of trivia is that video was surreptitiously recorded by a grandson of Jimmy Carter.
Jeremy, yes.
So, yeah, all right. So how does he process? Because you're friends with him at this point in 2012. How does that happen? How does that reverberate inside the Carter family?
Yeah, it was funny because he was telling me his grandson's a computer nerd, and he found this, and he got famous with it, and everyone wanted it, and he was proud of his accomplishment of getting some attention. But I remember when that happened, him talking about it, and he was pretty proud of him as a grandparent.
So he was proud of him. He was proud of him for leaking the video.
Yes, he was. Yeah, so I just kind of listened to him, and then we changed subjects.
Yeah.
No, I remember
that's
that.
Amazing. Oh, man. So I always wondered whether or not that was like, you shouldn't have done that, or it's like, oh, good. Yeah, sink old Mitt's campaign. We're trying to get Barry reelected here.
Yes.
So he was certainly at least enough of a bare knuckle political pugilist late in life.
Yeah. Well, he always said he'd support whoever the nominee was for Democratic nominee for president. So I think he did that. But I know that there's some contention before, like in his book, he wrote about supporting Barack Obama pretty early in 2008. And And then Barack Obama's advisor, Axelrod, contacted President Carter and said he couldn't speak at the convention.
Oh, wow.
Because he wanted to make sure he gets some Jewish votes, pretty much is what he told President Carter. And because President Carter had a book out at that time, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And so they didn't want President Carter, because he's always outspoken.
Yes.
He didn't care about the consequences. He told me when he wrote that book, I said, President Carter, that topic the title is a little bit provocative. I think South Africa, owns apartheid. I said, I think that's their word. And I said, I don't know. And I said, I know every story you told in there is true, but it just seems like it's going to be a problem for you. So he was really upset by that. And he wrote about it in his last book, Full Life. But so they told him to send the video clips, and they put it together, but they didn't let him speak. And that did hurt his feelings.
I was going to say, did that hurt him?
Yes, it did. He felt, because since 1972, he was a DNC chair. Then he was, in 76, he was the president. He went to every convention and spoke. And he was being uninvited. It did hurt his feelings, I could tell you. He didn't like that.
Yeah, he had such a complicated legacy amongst Democrats. Again, he's
and
all
kind of former presidents. Former presidents, yes, and current presidents. He let him have it.
How much was he on top of the kind of like political nerd minutia of politics? Was he somebody that was following this stuff super closely, or was it just kind of a top level? I assume he still probably got briefings as an ex-president on certain things.
Yes, he did. He said he got the most briefings from George H.W. Bush, was the most forthcoming. And then they were limited somewhat. If you remember, President Clinton gave him some freedom to do a couple of things to represent the United States in North Korea. And then President Carter came out and announced the deal without telling President Clinton.
Well,
that was embarrassing. And then he sent him to Haiti, and President Carter was negotiating with Cedras and Aristide, and President Clinton called, and President Carter said, I need more time, and hung up. And then President Clinton was mad because he said, we're storming the island. You got to go. And President Carter negotiated a deal. So those are kind of things that he believed in what he was doing, even if it meant stepping on some toes. And
the biggest toes he could possibly step on. Yes. But I mean, like, if there's anybody that's going to do it, it's an ex-president.
Yes. So he would, give advice unsolicited. You might have heard that at the funeral. Mm-hmm. I think it was Ford's eulogy. He gave unsolicited advice, but he meant well, and he was consistent. He didn't just attack Republicans. He attacked both parties that he felt needed some tutelage. So, but he was very involved with world events. Really got him excited. So he went to Zimbabwe. And I said, hey, President Carter, what was Zimbabwe like? He's like, what do you know about Zimbabwe? I'm like, used to be called Rhodesia, and Mugabe's the president. That's about all I know. But he then went on in the history and the African Congress, all this stuff. But he was very involved in world politics. And I don't think he cared where he is going to be placed in the number of presidents. I don't think he cared about that. Zero interest in that. And he just shrugged his shoulders, and people would ask him. He's like, whatever. That's what historians do. I just did my best and moved on.
So he very much just looked at it as this was just a thing. It was like high school. It was like just a thing that happened for 4 years.
Yes. Yeah. But he does joke and say he was involuntarily retired when he lost the election.
Yes.
So he does have some regrets, obviously, but looking at himself and letting other people down, I think, is what upset him. But I think he found peace, and I think he found satisfaction in serving others. And I really think that was his true calling, I think, after the presidency. And I think that afforded him the ability to do that because, hey, a former president's coming to Zimbabwe. Oh, okay, well, let's talk to him.
Yeah.
Where a Georgia governor is probably not going to carry the same weight as a former president.
He was somebody that continued to speak up about current politics right up until his waning days. One of the last big news stories about Jimmy Carter was that he was waiting to waiting before he died to vote for the Democratic nominee for president. What were those kind of waning days like as his friend? When was the last time that you saw him?
I saw him at Mrs. Carter's funeral. So I had 6th row seats. It was unbelievable. I was with family. It was what an honor to be there. But there he really didn't recognize me. So I went up to him, and he was probably medicated, but it was really sad to see him like that. So the last time I had a real conversation was his 75th wedding anniversary. So he invited me. Yeah, he was married 77 plus years, but so he invited me during COVID in 2021. He called me and said he's sick of the lockdown. He has to see people. So I'm done with this stuff. So I went down and sat with them at church. So President Carter was on one side, me, and then Mrs. Carter. And 2.5 hours, they just went in both ears talking to me. And it was amazing, all the stuff I learned. He invited me to his wedding, his anniversary. So he said, just do me a favor and don't put it on Facebook or anything, because not everyone's invited, only 200 people. So I walk in there, and a reporter's there. Reporter's like, hey, what are you doing here? Where are you from? I said, I'm Ricardo from Chicago. It's like, why are you here? I said, well, it's pretty easy. President Carter's 97 years old. Most of his friends are dead. I'm pretty much all that's left. And no one left. So I walk in there, and they say, hey, President Carter's coming out. And I saw his daughter-in-law that morning, and he just signed himself out of a hospital after another head injury. He fell again. He said, he doesn't look good, so don't approach him, no pictures. So I walk in the room, and it's President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, Speaker Pelosi, Paula Dean, Garth Brooks. I knew everybody in the room, okay? I knew everyone.
They were all famous.
All famous, except for Ricardo, okay? So there I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all these people. Ted Turner, Andrew Young. And President Carter gets wheeled in, and he looks around the room, and he goes, Ricardo, get over here. I'm like,
oh my God.
Yeah, I was like goosebumps, And so
that's amazing.
He says, you're right. I'm still alive. I made it. I'm 35th. And I said, President Carter, of all your accomplishments, Navy, governor, president, Nobel laureate, Habitat for Humanity, how in the heck you stay married for 75 years? And he smiled, and that's the last time we talked, and it was a great moment. He was so proud of that accomplishment. So proud. Him and his wife were so close. You can't talk about his successes without his wife.
Yeah.
She would correct him like hilariously. So they wrote a book together, Everything to Gain, Making the Most of the Rest of My Life. And if you look at the book, some paragraphs have a R, some have a J. R, only Mrs. Carter remembered that. J, only President Carter remembered that paragraph.
That's
they didn't agree.
Funny.
So they were so good together. She was so sweet and Southern, and he's more of a meticulous, always looking at his watch, time, productivity. They were perfect together, and I was so honored to be at that event. Not because of people there, but because of seeing President Carter and Mrs. Carter.
Yeah, I mean, they, very much of their era, especially in terms of cutting from the mold of like a Southern politician, where you have the strong wife that is, behind you. I remember listening to clips of President Johnson and Lady Bird on the phone, where it felt like there was this whole other world where the number one advisor that existed in that politician's life was his wife, and it sounds like that was a similar relationship.
And he was she had a total fear of public speaking, Mrs. Carter, when she started. Fear, a phobia. So he made her like pretty much go out and do speeches. And when he won Florida, which was critical, winning Florida in 1976, she went down there, introduced herself to people. And that one guy said to her, he's like, I don't know who your husband is, but if he can land you, I'm voting for him. So President Carter told that story all the time because he was so proud of her.
Yeah. Who was he close? Was he close with any of the other ex-presidents, or as after all the din had
Yeah.
kind of quieted? It feels like a very lonely job because you only really can relate to like 4 or 5 people at any given time.
Correct. He was real close to President Ford. They were like really good friends. They patched things up when Sadat was assassinated in 1981, President Sadat in Egypt, and President Nixon, President Ford, President Carter, and Stevie Wonder were on a plane together. I'm not kidding.
Sounds like a joke.
They went out there and President Ford and President Carter hit it off, and they just talked and talked, and they really became good friends after that. So it's pretty interesting. But I think that most of the stories he told were of regular people. He was so excited. So one of the stories, if I could share real quick.
Please, go ahead.
There's a lady named Mary Prince. She was a poor African-American, illiterate person that was in Columbus, Georgia, where Fort Benning is, now called Fort Moore. And she went to visit a friend, and someone was murdered there. And so the police came, and she wasn't from that town, so they said, "Hey, sign this, and then you won't get executed." So she signs it, and so she's in life in prison. So
wow.
This was in the 60s. So President Carter asked for a babysitter for his wife, or his daughter Amy, in 1970 when he became governor. She became the babysitter. So he says, "Hey, wow, you seem like a pretty good person. What'd you do?" She's like, "Well, I didn't do anything." He's like, "Okay, I heard it every time. Everyone's innocent." But he kept her on as the babysitter for Amy. She was 2 years old. And then he went to the White House and he got permission to be her like legal guardian to make sure.
Oh, wow.
So make sure she could be, what's that word? Became what do you call that? When you have a court ordered.
Ward?
Yes. And so turns out she was not guilty. So she was exonerated. So
wow.
She lives at the house that he built in 1961. There, she went with him for his Nobel Peace Prize, with him everywhere. She's family, and that's someone he admires. So in one of his books, Sharing Good Times, for example, he dedicated it to Mary Prince. And it's just a great story, a story of, everyone likes success stories in this country. Here you have someone that most people wouldn't listen to because, okay, you're African American, you're illiterate. Well, you probably get it. But he was a good listener, and he respected her and respected her story, and he championed her as someone he always talked about, always.
Yeah.
When I had a chance, I met her, I got to know her. I asked her to sign the book for me, and she was all embarrassed about it. But I said,
"Oh,
could you please autograph this? Because he always talks about you, and you mean so much to them. I would really appreciate it." So she did sign my book for me, which I really treasure.
That's wild. That's wild. Well, I'll tell you what, I just want to open the floor if there's any other stories that you have, because that's pretty much the end of the questions that I have. But any moments in time that you would like to share, I know that we would love to hear.
There's so many stories like Habitat, for example. When I was at the funeral in D.C. last week, every cab driver I had was from Ethiopia. And so I was talking to them. They asked where I was going, and every one of them said, "Oh, President Carter. Oh, I remember he came to my country." All of them had stories. All of them. And I was fortunate to go to Ethiopia as well for a couple of weeks, so I was sharing my stories. And then the one cab driver said, "I met President Carter 3 times." I'm like, "You did? Well, when did you come here?" "I came here in 1999, and I met him in 2009. He said, "He built my house in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
in 2009. I'm like, "He was building your house?" He's like, 3 times I met him. He came, built my house. He said, "My payments are $1,000 a month." He said, "Right now, my house is a $500,000 home in D.C. It's $3,000 a month rent." He said he came during the week with everyone. He said, "But you know what? I was there on a Saturday. President Carter showed up Saturday when no one else was there to finish what he was doing." So that's the kind of person that President Carter was. It wasn't for the cameras. He really wanted to build houses. So for me, when I would build the last 7 builds together, we did together. And I'd have to be careful because if I went up and he saw me, he'd say, "Dr. Fernandez, is your house done?" I'm like, "No, sir, it's not done." "Well, get to work. What are you doing here?" So you don't want to bother him when he's working because
Gotcha.
if he stops and talks to me, then that's two people not working on a house. So he took it seriously and he used humor to embarrass you.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, I cherish those times being chastised by a former president.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. He sounds like a little bit of a ball buster.
Yes, a good sense of humor. Very good.
Yeah. That's great. How was the funeral last week?
Well, it's pretty surreal, and it's funny. I was seated in the 39th row. He was the 39th president, so I thought I wore his tie that he gave me. I had him sign it.
Oh, wow.
He gave me a bunch of his stuff, but this is something I wore. But there's 5 presidents, 4 first ladies, 8 former vice presidents, 7 Supreme Court justices. Bill Gates was 10 rows behind me looking at my fat head. So I was just surrounded by all these people, and it was an honor to be there to pay my respects to him.
Yeah. But
Total
it has
honor.
to be a surreal experience.
Oh, that Secret Service was all uptight and you're worried, but just to see the family there and hear all the nice words about him, it was a fitting tribute. But what I liked also was waiting in line with public to see his body at the Rotunda. It was 4 hours and 10-minute wait, and I did it after at 8:30 at night till 12:40 in the morning. Meeting people that never knew much about him and sharing stories, it was really heartwarming. And when I went to Rotunda,
to see that kind of love and
to
affection
see
for
people
him.
that didn't know much about him, but they all had something they respected about him. And they didn't know what party he was on. A lot of these young kids had no idea what party.
Yeah.
But they respected him for the kind of character that he was. But when I went to the Rotunda, I saw, it was weird. There was the 38th President Ford statue. He was 39.
Yep.
Reagan statue was there. Truman, his favorite president. Dr. King was there. Next day I went back. I'm like, did you guys put these there for him? These are all significant to President Carter. She said, no, they've been there for years. I haven't been in the Rotunda for a while, but that's pretty amazing to me that looking there and seeing the people that had some type of connection to him be there in the Capitol was pretty amazing. It was heartwarming to see.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I was sad, but I looked at a century of accomplishments.
If anyone's gonna do it, man, he got all the toothpaste out of the tube.
Exactly,
At a certain point, you just got to say, "Job well done."
Yes, now Monday would have been 44 years as an ex-president. That's a blessing.
Yeah.
Second place is Hoover with 31. So he made the most of it.
And to do over a year in hospice. I remember when he first went into hospice, I did an episode about his legacy for the primaries because I figured, hey, look, how much usually when you go to hospice, it's not, you're counting time in days and hours, not months and years. But he just continued to soldier on right up until the end, and really it is his legacy after he leaves the White House, which is rare, that is the lead of so much of the coverage of the man that he was.
Yes, I think he has a lot. He could look back and feel like he did what he wanted to do. He wanted to live a life of service, and I think he did that. He taught almost 1,000 Sunday school lessons for free in Georgia. I mean, that's amazing. Accessible, willing to take pictures with everybody, just to hear their little stories. And he was really a special person that had a lot of patience. Yeah. But a hard worker. So if you go on a trip with him, like a Habitat build, you're tired, you're sore. He's already done 2 hours of interviews before. Lunch he spends raising money for Habitat. Afterwards, he's doing meetings and talking to world leaders. That guy didn't sleep, and I was tired. And he's honestly working. So you look at what he was able to accomplish, like health-wise, it's amazing.
Truly remarkable. Well, I'll tell you what, Ricardo, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an absolute treat, and I know I speak for the audience when I say thank you for taking time out of your day to share your extraordinary friendship with President Carter.
Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate it allowing me to have an opportunity to share a couple stories, and thanks for what you do. Appreciate it.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. You can send me an email, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. You can find me on social media, TikTok, maybe, Justin R. Young. That's the same name for Instagram and Twitter. And then on YouTube, you can find us at Politics. That's our video version. We're live on video. PayPal.me/payjury is where you need to go if you would like to give me a one-time donation, especially as I head out to DC to cover all the DC stuff. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. The inauguration. Why am I saying DC stuff? We're covering the inauguration on Monday. We're also live for that We're Not Wrong episode. Go ahead and get your tickets on Eventbrite. That is on Sunday. Cash App is PX3 Cash. You can send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Of course, you can only get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. Either $3 a week. It's billed as $12 a month, or $99 for the entire year. That's 150 episodes of PX3 for under $100. But our founding tier is the one that gets your name read at the end of the podcast, like these fine folks, including L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes. Oh yeah, it's Adam, Neil, AB Puppy, Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will Porta, The Borge B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, a dog named Checkers, Gloria Young, my mom, Jerry, Trucker, John, Berkeley Steven, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read on the show. Only one place to do it. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That's it for us this week. Again, I'm in D.C. for the inauguration. It's going to be cold, dude. It's going to be cold. But I'm going to be rooting on the commies. The Commanders play when I land on Saturday. It's going to be a fun time. Yeah. Anyway, till next time. This is your old pal, Justin Robert Young, saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss. Oh, 3.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show Audio.